Does this mean that a Tory majority is now a sure thing?
Well, we don't take anything for granted, but what I'm glad Nigel Farage has recognised is that the only way to get Brexit delivered, to move on, deliver on the result of the referendum and not put any of that at risk is with a majority Conservative government. So I very much welcome that he's come to that realisation. I'd urge everybody, regardless of how you voted, if you want to respect the result of the referendum, you think it should be delivered so we can move on to talking about your other priorities like the NHS, schools and policing. The only way to do that is to vote Conservative, and delighted that Nigel Farage has realised.
OK, well, we'll get on to some of the plans that the Conservatives are talking about today. But, I mean, are you planning to reciprocate with any Tories candidates standing down in seats that are more likely to be won by the Brexit Party, particularly in some of those sort of the northern Labour heartlands?
No, absolutely not. We're running candidates everywhere. We think we have a really strong message to deliver to people. It's not just about getting Brexit done. We're the only party who can deliver that with a majority and deliver it in a matter of weeks after being elected, now that this new deal has been negotiated, but also then move on to the other things. I think we've got an exciting and inclusive agenda about the NHS, about keeping communities safe with more police, making sure our schools are well funded, levelling up across the country with infrastructure. That's an agenda we want to take to every single part of this country, and we think it's resonating with people.
Are you worried there are things like Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell referring to this as the Trump alliance? Are you not worried that this actually might damage you? You might gain voters maybe so it would have voted Brexit Party otherwise in some of those seats, but you might lose some of those perhaps more Remain Tories who were perhaps holding their nose over voting for a Prime Minister who would deliver Brexit, but now feel a little bit more anxious that this isn't what they want.
No, I think because regardless of how people voted in the referendum, I think most people realise that we should respect the result of that referendum, and actually they just want an end to all this uncertainty at this point. And that's what you get with a majority Conservative government. You get Brexit done and respected. But also I think everyone is finding something they like in our domestic agenda. It's based on a strong economy, responsible economic management, investing in public services, levelling up across the country, spreading opportunity. Then people think, well, that's exciting. I'd like to have my politicians in government focus on all those things. Let's get Brexit done and have that conversation, and that's what we offer.
I wonder how exciting people do find responsible economic management, because that's when they've got a choice between parties who are spending a heck of a lot more money on public services and a party who is spending a heck of a lot more money on public services. Maybe they will choose the latter. Now, your party released information over the weekend about this 1.2 trillion pound cost of the supposed Labour commitments. That's been roundly rubbished by an awful lot of people looking at what are likely to be the policies in the next Labour manifesto, because not like to see those until next week at the earliest, yours or theirs. But you've got some new research suggesting that we could actually be looking at a bill for every single taxpayer from Corbyn's what you call reckless spending plans. How much is it going to cost us?
Well, that's absolutely right. If you look at Labour's reckless spending plans, it means that an average taxpayer in this country is going to be handed an additional bill of £2,500, £2,400 every year to pay for the cost of Corbyn's policies. That's a shocking amount. It's the average month's pay for someone, an average worker in this country, and it reveals the true scale of what Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party are planning for this country. And it will be, British people that pay the price through higher taxes.
Well, again, this is based on some of the things that have been talked about or voted on at conference. They're not necessarily going to be in the next Labour manifesto.
Well, our starting point for all of this is the 2017 Labour manifesto, which they haven't rowed back from any of those commitments. Then we've gone through and looked at all the other announcements officially that they've made in press releases. And yes, their conference, because their rules state very clearly that policies adopted at conference become part of their official policy platform. And by the way, there's lots of things, Julia, we haven't included in the document, and we've taken very conservative estimates to give them the benefit of the doubt. You do all of that, you still end up with a massive number, and that's going to cost, as I said, ordinary taxpayers £2,400 every year in higher taxes to pay for all this reckless spending.
What about all the Conservative, some might say from your side, reckless spending plans? How much is that going to cost every family on average?
We've been very clear. We do not believe we should be borrowing to fund our day-to-day expenditure. That's how most households budget. That's how we think the country should budget. We will invest responsibly and in a controlled manner in long-term infrastructure projects. But crucially, at the end end of the Parliament, debt as a percentage of GDP under the Conservatives will be lower than it is today. That is not something that is true for the Labour Party. Debt will be rising
So
uncontrollably.
what taxes are going to go up?
And as other independent forecasters have said, their plans represent, in terms of borrowing, wholly unprecedented order of magnitude difference.
So what taxes are going to go up then?
No, we currently are forecast to collect £30 billion more in tax revenue than we're spending on day-to-day expenditure. So there's already headroom to do those things. We've invested about just less than half of that, £13.5 billion, in people's priorities like the NHS, like schools, like 20,000 more police officers. So that's responsible economic management. And as I said, it's in clear contrast to the Labour Party, where not only are people going to be saddled with a £2,400 extra tax bill every year, but also debt at the end of the Parliament will be higher and rising uncontrollably. That's a very worrying situation for people.
OK, can I also ask you about the Cobra meeting today the Prime Minister's going to chair to look at dealing with the emergency situation with the flooding across large swathes of the north of the country. What took the government so long to declare an emergency and hold a Cobra meeting when we see, whole villages underwater?
Well, the Prime Minister is chairing the meeting, as you said, today. I know he's very, very focused on the situation. I personally experienced flooding in my own constituency in quite a severe fashion over the summer. And the Prime Minister personally at the time was very engaged in what was happening in my area in North Yorkshire. The government machine was also responding. And I'm confident that that will happen here. And the emergency services at the moment are doing a terrific job. People should listen to the notices that are out there, because it's obviously still a live situation. But as we saw in my own situation earlier in the summer, as we are seeing and will see now, both the Prime Minister and the government will respond fulsomely to protect people and keep them safe. OK,
just finally, we know personalities are going to be a very big issue at the next general election. Also about Jeremy Corbyn and his past, and also, of course, Boris Johnson and his past. The former Tory MP Nick Bowles said yesterday that the Prime Minister was a compulsive liar who has betrayed every single person he's ever had any dealings with, every woman he has ever loved him. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm disappointed that Nick's saying that, and that's obviously his point of view. He's had long-standing views about that, but what I've seen from the Prime Minister is terrific leadership, pulling off something that nobody thought was possible, getting us a new deal to leave the European Union. He's put together a great team. He's got an exciting and inclusive message that he's taking around the country. People are resonating to it. They like the kind of leadership he's offering. They like the policies that he's offering, and everywhere I go, there's enormous support for him, and I hope we have a chance to put that in practice with the majority Conservative government led by the Prime Minister, getting Brexit delivered, focusing on people's priorities, and that's the agenda that's on offer.
Okay. The next half hour, we're going to be talking to Nigel Farage, the man of the moment, about that decision by the Brexit Party to basically stand down candidates across 317 Conservative seats. I'm assuming, of course, that were won in 2017. That includes my next guest seat, Dominic Grieve, former Tory and Attorney General, of course, leading Remain campaign and now an independent party candidate. He joins us now. Good morning to you, Dominic.
Good morning.
Good morning. Is this an expectation, of course, as one of the seats won in 2017, that you won't be facing a Brexit Party candidate?
I assume that may be the case, but there is a Brexit Party candidate who has been nominated to stand, and obviously he hasn't put in his nomination papers. So, and actually I saw him on Sunday when I was out and about. So it is possible that he's still standing, but I detected some doubt on his part.
Oh, yeah, indeed. Of course, the Brexit Party candidates have been told not to put their nomination papers in, unless or until instructed. You, of course, also not going to face a Liberal Democrat candidate, because they've stood aside. We are definitely seeing the formation now, the early signs of a Remain alliance and a Leave alliance, aren't we not?
There are elements of that, and I think from my impression, yes, I've been doing in the constituency and campaigning, that people are thinking, I say tactically is perhaps the wrong word, but they're thinking very hard about the issues in their own constituency where they are living, and about how they can maximise their influence through their vote. So whether that's something which is just a phenomenon in my constituency, or whether in fact it's going to be prevalent everywhere, I don't know.
Now, of course, we're seeing certainly the Brexit Party obviously offering a fillip to the Conservative Party. But, of course, unless they stand down other candidates, we are not necessarily looking at a Tory majority. What do you think the biggest issues are going to be at this election? I mean, you've left your party over the issue of Brexit. Do you think for many of your constituents, and indeed constituents across the country, that Remain is going to be the number one issue for those members, and Leave for the Leave voters, rather than spending policies, the NHS, education, defence, all those other issues?
I think Brexit is going to be dominant because it has such an influence on the other issues. After all, if you think that leaving the EU is going to be economically damaging to the United Kingdom, then all the promises that are being made about economic policy have to be seen through that prism. And similarly, if you think that leaving is really important and the United Kingdom is going to flourish as a result, you will presumably look at the policies that are being offered and see them in a rather different light. My judgment has been throughout this, and indeed I had a public meeting last night, and one of the themes of that public meeting was how can the promises of greater public expenditure be realised if, in fact, we are going into a period when our economy is going to be very wobbly because of Brexit.
Well, obviously, I must point out, nominations close on Thursday, so we will find out all of the candidates standing after that in your seat and others. Let me also talk about your role, having chaired the Intelligence and Security Select Committee in the House of Commons. You've been very outspoken about the fact that you've got a report that's been around, frankly, for quite a few months now, and is delivered to Downing Street last month into possible Russian interference in the last general election and indeed the 2016 EU referendum, which has not been published. Yesterday, we were speaking to a government minister who was saying, look, there's the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, insisting it was just, absolute nonsense that there was anything damaging in this report. But still, this report is not being published. Do you believe, as the person who knows what's in this report, do you believe this would be damaging to the government? And is that why they're choosing not to publish it?
I'm afraid I'm going to stick by my rule. I'm not going to comment on the content of this report. It remains classified. We produced the report. It's a cross-party group of MPs and peers. We don't act in a partisan way. If you sat in our committee meetings, you wouldn't know who belongs to which political party. And we produced this report in a professional way to inform the public about the risks that Russia poses to the United Kingdom. Not just about elections. It's a wide range of issues. But elections and the subversion of the democratic process is part of the report, which is one of the reasons why we thought it would be particularly valuable that it should be published before the general election took place. And
once election purdah begins, those reports are not published. We know some other reports were brought forward and were published because of that. But at this point, it can't. Is it? Am I correct in thinking it can't now be published under the rules?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It can't be published. It has to be laid before Parliament when Parliament is sitting, which is why the deadline was the last day on which Parliament was sitting, and why I took a point of order and raised this issue when it became apparent that inexplicably and without any explanation being offered, which I would normally have expected from a Prime Minister, a decision had clearly been made not to publish it. And I tried to get it published. I'm afraid it now won't see the light of day, I suspect, for many months, because quite apart from the fact Parliament has to be sitting when it's laid, you really also need the committee to be sitting when it's laid. And the committee may well not be reformed for 3 or 4, 5. Last time we had nearly 6 months after the general election before it started again.
And in terms of, we understand some leaks have come out from it about Russian donors to the Conservative Party, whether this has influenced anything at all, whether that's in the report or not. Is that a concern for you?
I'm sorry to disappoint people, but I'm absolutely rigorous about this. I'm not going to leak my own report.
OK. Can I also ask you about something another former Conservative MP and independently on the benches, Nick Poles, had to say about your former Tory party leader in Boris Johnson? He said that the Prime Minister was, in his words, a compulsive liar who has betrayed every single person he's ever had any dealings with, every woman who has ever loved him. Is that a fair criticism of Boris Johnson?
Well, I certainly not in the position to comment on the Prime Minister's personal life, and I wouldn't seek to do so. I'm absolutely in no position to make a judgment. But the Prime Minister is a liar, and is somebody who resorts to lies very frequently, is quite apparent within the political context.
Is that one of the reasons why you wanted to leave the Conservative Party? Was it not just the Brexit issue? Was there also a concern about Boris Johnson and his personal character? Yes,
I'm afraid there is. I find him as a leader a worrying figure, because whilst it's true that in politics, the necessity often in politics how can I put this? To often tell half-truths is perhaps a well-established problem that we all have to encounter, including people who are ministers who are answering questions. What is unusual with the present Prime Minister is that he readily resorts to outright whopping lies whenever it appears to suit him. So it's very difficult to make any judgment about things that he promises, for example, because lots of what he says is patently untrue. And I've never come across somebody in the context of politics who behaves in quite this fashion. And it's so well documented now, and it's continuing to happen. Well, one can almost watch it happen on a daily basis. And that does, for me, call into question his fitness to be Prime Minister and his fitness to lead a political party in the mainstream in a parliamentary democracy.
I mean, it's incredibly damning words from you there. And yet, if there is a split vote, if we don't see Boris Johnson winning a majority, we're going to be back in a hung parliament. Very, very likely that the Liberal Democrats, the SNP, will put Jeremy Corbyn into office. Do you not have, if you have concerns about Boris Johnson, also concerns about Jeremy Corbyn being Prime Minister of this country?
I do. I have grave concerns about Jeremy Corbyn.
More or less than you have about Boris Johnson?
I think they are equal. There would be equally, at my judgment, Jeremy Corbyn would be a disastrous Prime Minister, and his policies are catastrophic for the country. So I certainly don't wish to see him go into Downing Street. And indeed, from my point of view, standing as an independent, I will do everything possible to prevent that happening.
Yesterday, he had a press conference in which he announced that the Brexit Party will not be fielding candidates in 317 Conservative seats. Why those? Well, they're the seats that the Tories won in the 2017 general election. That means, though, candidates will be standing in 314 seats. A lot of those, though, are going to be the seats that the Conservatives need to win to get a majority so they can deliver, they say, their Brexit deal. Let's talk about all of that now with Nigel Farage. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Well, a lot of papers, obviously a lot of this, depending on their political persuasion, have called this a capitulation, a unilateral leave alliance, and you've got nothing in return. Is that true?
There is some truth in that. I did it because I knew that in the south and the southwest of England, the majority of our votes came from the Conservative Party, and the effect of our standing would be a lot of Liberal Democrat wins. What I did not want to see under any circumstances was a second referendum, which I think would do just the most enormous damage to our democracy. So I did it, but also, Boris Johnson did toughen his line up considerably on where he wants the next phase of the negotiations to go by saying we'd negotiate a Canada-style trade deal without political alignment. So I thought, you know what? It's time to put country before party, and that's exactly what I did yesterday. Far from getting any sense of reciprocity from the Conservatives, and certainly miles away from them wanting to have a Leave majority in Parliament, what's clear is it's all about the Conservative Party. It's all about them having a majority. And the one thing I know from history is if they're left with Brexit on their own, they will blow it once again.
Well, you said you put country before party, and there was a lot of pressure on you, a lot of Sunday papers as well, putting pressure. We know a lot of people within your own party, people who've been very much involved in the Leave campaign, Aaron Banks and others, old friend of yours, have been pressuring you on this. What actually changed it, though? Because you mentioned this, there's a particular video that Boris Johnson put out, seen by a few 100,000 people, but definitely aimed at only one man, aimed at you, in which he said that he was looking for a straightforward free trade agreement, not based on any kind of political alignment, super Canada plus. Those are the words he said. But you've called this a very clear change in direction. It's not, isn't this? Hasn't this already been said?
Well, if you read, I know no one has, but if you actually read the deal from Brussels, it commits us to a free trade deal based on regulatory alignment on social policy, employment policy, environmental policy, and even taxation. What Boris Johnson did on Sunday evening is to say, we're changing that. Now, I intend to keep him to his word.
And this has been a key factor in your political career, hasn't it? Even though, because people famous, 7 times trying to get elected to Westminster, you have actually influenced the 2015 general election, got us the 2016 referendum, European election win this year, probably instrumental in the Tory leadership change, and indeed Boris Johnson winning his leadership. Has he telephoned you? Has Boris Johnson actually spoken to you at all about this, either in the last 24 hours or at any point in the last few weeks?
No.
You've not had any personal contact with him?
I have not had any personal contact at all, no. I made this decision because I believed
Oh, goodness me, the line just went a bit. Could you start again? Sorry, the line just went down.
I said I made this decision because I think it was the right thing to do, and I think we should, in circumstances like this, put country before party. And in doing so, I think I've stopped a referendum. And now we will have a contest in 300 seats around the country, mostly held by Labour, but other Remainer parties too. And we will have a full debate in those seats, and they can choose. Leave voters in those seats can choose who they think is the most sincere on this issue.
But there's a big concern, though. A lot of the papers today say, oh, thank you very much, Nigel Farage. However, what about going further? Because you're talking about Labour leave seats. You're looking about a lot of the seats which the Conservatives would need for a majority. Yeah, they can get another 317 of those seats, maybe. But they're going to struggle to get a majority if that leave vote is split. As we've seen, semblance of a Remain alliance, Lib Dems with Plaid and the Greens, obviously not with Labour.
Absolutely.
But are you willing to stand down more candidates to enable a Conservative majority? Why not?
No, I don't work for the Conservative Party. And as I've said, left to their own devices, they will drop all the promises and pledges that they've made. Also, in terms of numbers, I mean, some of these arguments being made today are ludicrous because, of course, in the Labour heartlands, the Brexit Party takes more votes from the Labour Party than it takes from the Conservatives. And we saw that back in 2015, when actually the effect of UKIP hurt Labour a lot more in terms of seats than it did the Conservatives.
And in terms of what you've been offered in return for this, a lot of people are saying you've been offered a peerage. Have you?
The first time I was offered something was a safe Conservative seat in 2005. Since then, there have been about 12 attempts, I think, to get me to accept jobs, titles, ranks, all as a means of buying me off. I'm sorry to say to them, I'm not for sale.
But so you have been offered a peerage this time round?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But Julia, I'm not interested.
But I'm not saying you'd be bought off for a peerage, but if at the end of all this Brexit's delivered and there's no need for the Brexit Party anymore, of course, as you say, that may be some time hence once we've got all that done. If it happens, would you want to have a peerage? Would you want to sit in the House of Lords?
I don't want anything. I want to get a proper Brexit and the independence for this country. And when we get that, I would have achieved a mission that by then would have taken almost 30 years.
And in terms of let's just say let's cut forward to December the 13th. Let's just say there is a Conservative majority, as some of the polls are predicting, and there is that. And then Boris Johnson delivers Brexit October the 31st, and then we start that period into the transition December the 2020. We get a deal or of some sort. Michel Barnier, of course, on the EU side has said, it will take 3 years. Boris Johnson says he can do it in a matter of months. At the end of December 2020, if you don't believe that the deal taking us fully out of the transition period and out of the EU is proper Brexit, that free trade deal, Canada plus, as you've suggested, will you fight again?
Look, I'm never going to give up until we achieve this, all right? I'm not going away. I know the Conservative Party would like to emigrate, but it's not going to happen, all right? We have got to get this properly done. And I want Boris Johnson to keep to the pledges he made on Sunday night. We have to change the terms of this deal before Parliament ratifies it, because it's not good enough as it is.
And just finally, a lot of talk about your motivations and about, you just want to be in the debates and you just want to be on the telly and make money. What are your motivations?
Well, I can't do both, can I? I can't do both. Look, this whole thing is ludicrous. Julia, I've known you a long time. You know, after that referendum back in 2016 and the promises that everyone gave to honour the result of the referendum, I stood down from frontline politics and I was happy to do so. I only came back and founded the Brexit Party because we'd been let down by our mainstream parties like a cheap pair of braces. That's why I'm back. I don't need to do this. I'm doing it because I want to achieve a goal, not because I want a career in politics. Absolutely.
And if that goal isn't achieved, you're not going to go away?
No.
Let's turn our attention back to the general election and let's talk to a Labour Party candidate, Paul Sweeney. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, it's, of course, all the focus has been on the Brexit Party in the last 24 hours after Nigel Farage announced that he was not going to stand candidates in 317 seats. Those are the Tory seats that were won in 2017. Some of those, of course, now being contested by the likes of someone we spoke to an hour ago, the independent candidate, Dominic Grieve. He is, though, going to stand in 314 seats. Of course, a lot of those will be Labour seats that you need to win. How damaging do you think this sort of unilateral Leave alliance on behalf of the Brexit Party. How damaging is that going to be to Labour's prospects at the election?
I don't think it will be particularly damaging at all, really, because the reality is that the bulk of these voters would have been Tory voters anyway, or UKIP voters. And also, when you look at the way the dynamics of this election will look, particularly when this pact has been made between Boris and Farage, it will kind of undermine any credentials that Farage had to speak for working class people and for the common sense man in the street. I think that will be put paid to by this pact, this sort of Thatcherite pact. So I don't really see it holding much water, certainly not in Scotland.
All right, you say a Thatcherite pact. It's also been called by, I think, John McDonnell, a Trump alliance. Can I just ask you, your phone is going in and out a little bit, so we're going to do our best to persevere with the line. So how damaging do you think that is to the Tories then? Do you think the fact that the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage, seen by many on the left to be more right wing than the Tories, that sort of alliance, that act could actually maybe perhaps leave more Tory voters, perhaps more swing voters, floating voters, voting for the Labour Party?
Yeah, I think it might well. I mean, this election is going to be very volatile and very unpredictable. I think that's one thing we can know for sure. And I think when you look at the way in which this is happening, it's a sort of stitch-up between two elite figures, then people will be like, well, I don't think that's a game. I don't think that's fair play at all. I think they're trying to sort of rig this thing or gerrymander it. So I think people will be put off by that, if anything. I think people like a sense of fair play. And if they think the dice has been loaded, then they won't be attracted by that.
Bill said there'd be a lot of concern about 5 million believed Labour Leave voters who will be put off by your manifesto, if we ever see it, in terms of your commitment on what you want to get from what you want to do about Brexit. This rather confused, holding a second referendum, negotiating for 3 months to get a new Brexit deal, and then campaigning either for Remain or for your new Brexit deal. That's not going to be very enticing for a lot of your Labour Party long-time supporters and voters who also supported Leave in 2016.
I think it's the only democratic way forward. When you look at what we're proposing, what we're saying is we have to bring our country back together because, as we know, these simple binary yes or no, Remain or Leave referendums split the country, and that's what we need to get away from.
Well, hold on a minute. Wait a minute. Wait. If you have a binary referendum and that splits the country and you want to bring our country back together, how does having a second referendum do that?
Well, it might seem counterintuitive, but the only way to really truly resolve this is because when you saw Remain versus Leave in 2016, the Leave proposition didn't have a clear plan for what it wanted to deliver. And there's a number, within that 52% that voted Leave, there's a myriad of different ideas of what that actually meant, whether it's customs union, Norway, Switzerland, Canada, etc. But what we need to now do is get a detailed prospectus in front of the British people and say, look, said Leave, here's the proposal for Leave, we've agreed a deal with the EU, do you want it or do you want to reject it? And I think that's the only fair way to resolve this once and for all. As much as I'm not a fan of referendums, I think this is the only way to finally exorcise this demon from our public life so we can finally move on.
Well, and I can ask you, why do you think that having a democratic vote, which to have this say there was a vote in Parliament for there to be a referendum, and all the parties you would have been elected as an MP in 2017 with a promise in your manifesto to implement the Brexit vote, and obviously a different version from Tories, but nevertheless implement the vote. How do you think that it would resolve it if there is a vote to remain? Why do you think that Leavers would accept that? Why wouldn't they ask for, best out of 5 instead of best out of 3?
Well, because I think the only way to ultimately resolve it is to have a specific deal that people can then say, yes, we agree with that deal, we'll ratify it, and then we'll leave on those terms. Or, no, we're not happy with that deal, we'll reject it, and we'll continue as a member. I think that's the only way to do it, because ultimately you're going to continue to go round and round in circles with it.
Okay, sorry, your phone line's going. I don't know whether you're walking around or not, Paul. The phone line keeps disappearing a little bit. But again, a lot of people would just say, but if the deal you're looking at, and again, we don't know yet what Labour's immigration policy is going to be. There was a voter party conference for there to be continued free movement within the EU. We also don't know exactly what your deal is going to be. Of course, we would know that by the time we got to the referendum. But again, lots of question marks about what sort of deal you'd be offered by the EU when you're saying we might or might not, depending on whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, campaign to remain in the EU. I mean, that wouldn't really leave much of a choice. A sort of a Brexit in name only, customs union still with full regulatory alignment, etc., or remain. That won't really give the 17.4 million Leave voters much of an option, will it? I mean, I don't know how I'd vote in that scenario.
Well, I think we're faced with a trilemma, really, if you look at Brexit. Ultimately, we're either in the customs union as a whole UK, or you have to have a hard border somewhere. And we know the EU would never agree to a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, so Boris Johnson's opted to put a hard border within the United Kingdom between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. And if anyone who believes in the future of the United Kingdom has anything to say about this, having a hard border inside the UK is totally unacceptable, and that's why the DUP walked away from the deal. So in doing that sort of stitch-up, Boris Johnson's actually threatened the future of the United Kingdom itself, and I don't think that's what people were voting for in 2016. So what Labour's trying to do is find a deal that protects the integrity of the United Kingdom by having a customs union-based arrangement, also ensures that there can't be any movement away from the baseline workers and consumer rights that were built up over our time as members of the European Union. When we've got that basic principle in place with a deal, then it would put back to the British people and will allow democracy to prevail. It's not about whether Labour is behind it or not. It's basically saying, there's what we've done. We think this is the best possible way to go forward with a Brexit deal. You can either endorse it or reject it. And then if you reject it, we'll continue as a member state of the European Union. And if you're still not happy with it, then you're more than welcome in the future general election to vote for another party that would propose something differently.
OK, well, we shall see whether that goes away or not. Now, today, Labour is announcing plans to what they call throw open the door for adults to study and retrain throughout their lives, take advantage of the green industrial revolution. That's the headline. Looking forward to a speech to Blackpool today by Labour's Shadow Education Secretary Angela Rayner, ensuring everyone has access to training and education throughout their lives to end a skills shortage here. But, of course, very similar to what was announced by the Liberal Democrats only yesterday.
Well, Labour's running its own race. We're offering a proposal as the only party that can form a government or an alternative government to the Conservative Party. Labour's only party will be able to realistically form a government alternative to the Conservative Party. We're offering this fantastic opportunity for people to realise their full potential throughout their lives. I keep thinking of one of the greatest tragedies in this country, and it must be the failure for people to reach their full potential because of whatever circumstances they find themselves in, whether it's unemployment or poverty. And I think having that opportunity to find a route out of it, particularly having lifelong access to education and training opportunities, is going to be such a powerful opportunity for people to realise their full potential. And when they realise their full potential, the whole community benefits, the whole country benefits, and becomes more prosperous. So I think it's a win-win, and it's a no-brainer, frankly. I'm really excited by it.
And are you concerned at all about the number of candidates who've been forced to stand down? Because you were, I suppose, instrumental in a Conservative candidate standing down, accused of actually groping you in the House of Commons bar in rather extraordinary circumstances. But we've seen huge number of candidates who've been standing down, lots of different circumstances, for anti-Semitic comments, or we've seen a Liberal Democrat standing down today over evidence on social media. He's repeatedly used the N-word, despite being involved in an anti-racism campaign. Again and again, people are being forced to stand down. Are you concerned at all that, certainly on the Labour front, there are quite a few candidates who you've lost. Are you going to actually have enough candidates left in the race at this point?
No, we plan to stand candidates in every constituency in the United Kingdom, but of course this was an unexpected, snap election. Normally,
wasn't that unexpected? And people have been talking about it for months.
There's been havering over it, as we know. There's been all sorts of, procrastination over this issue. But what I would say is, normally we'd have a 5-year term, and people would be selected years in advance of these elections. And I think what's basically happened is, with every party that's been involved, there have been certain characters that have got through that have proven not to be up to standard, and that's just the nature of where we are with this election just now. But Labour is very much spanning every constituency in Britain, and we'll be hoping to win in a large number of constituencies in order to form a Labour government.